Well, hello everyone. My name is Christopher with Elm Street, and we are here today with a visual artist. This is Shannon Murphy, aka Murph, is how I know him and how I'll talk with him a lot, and who is the owner of Mouse Cafe. So, for the businesses out there, that might be how you might identify, but this is Shannon Murphy, visual artist here, local visual artist here. So, Murph, thanks for doing this. I appreciate you taking the time to interview for a little bit. We'll just jump right into some questions. I'm glad you were able to do this. But just to get to know you a little bit better, why don't we talk a little bit about you and how you got involved in visual art, and maybe what you do on we'll just say a day-to-day basis as an introductory level with your visual art. How's that sound?
Sure. Yeah. Hey, thanks a lot for having me, Christopher. I appreciate it. It's good to see you out there, and I hope everybody's doing okay. Um, so I'm Murph. My name is Shannon Murphy, and my studio name is Mouse Cafe, as you mentioned. And I'm primarily two-dimensional, um, mixed media, multimedia type expressionism. I do a lot of painting. That's really what I'm passionate about. But I'm not really shy about throwing in all sorts of different things into the work that I do. And, it's just, it's one of those places where, um, in the broad scope of things, in this great world we live in my workspace, that's where what I say goes. And, and it's where I get to really let loose and express myself. I know we've had a lot of conversations over the years, and it's always interesting to see what comes of people's expression, and this is how I go about it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Let me ask, just because I'm curious. I mean, for those that are watching, we have several of Murph's pieces in our lobby, along with a lot of the local artists guilds. You know, an array of artists, but Murph has probably two or three pieces in there in the lobby at Elm Street right now, and a lot of it is very, as you portray, 2D, multi-dimension or multimedia, multi-dimensional, vibrant colors a lot of times, but expressionism. So let me ask, just because I don't know, I've never asked this question of you before. Is there another art form that you dabbled in first before going into the 2D painting and finding a passion there, or did you immediately just pick it up and go into that direction, or were there other findings along the way?
Was there a stepping stone? That's a great question. Um, so I started this just like you did, with paper and pencils and crayons, just like we all do as children. Um, and I think everybody continues down that path to an extent that it just maybe doesn't play a role in their life anymore. Um, but I'm really a big fan of, I like a lot of color. I like things that are very interesting to look at. I like things that, even if I spend a lot of time as a viewer, I can continue to relax and connect with work because of that depth and a lot of the layering. And it's a really exciting thing to install work at Elm Street with the local artist guild, and I think we installed almost 80 pieces. It's a vast array of different work. There's some sculpture, some clay sculpture, lots of paintings, some printing, all sorts of different things going on, and that's a big it's a big thing to be a part of, I think, for people, and just being able to find ways to put the things that I express emotionally, two-dimensionally, to put that in front of people and let them process that themselves. I'm not usually hung up on any sort of a message in the work that I do. Uh, as far as communicating to an audience or swaying how they're going to think about an idea. But I assure you, there are a lot of messages in the work that I do, and I layer those things in. I hope I answered your question in there somewhere.
Yeah, no, actually, interestingly enough, I was actually headed towards that, so I might ask you to unpack it a little bit more because I'm interested. The obviously 2D expressionism. So, do you find this is a twofold question. One,
Sure.
you find that you're often expressing a certain theme or similar themes as you're making your pieces, and then two, I mean, I think you already kind of answered this, but I'll let you unpack it just a little bit more. Whenever you are expressing something, are you hoping that people pick that up, or are you just wanting them purely to experience it and and I don't mean it as move on, but then move on, are you hoping that there's, do you have a desire? And I don't mean that so much as an agenda as much as I mean uh, an experience that they might have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That's another great question, I think. Well, this really helps you process what you do, and understand yourself a little better too. So, as far as, so essentially I have this layering process that if you've seen any any amount of my work, I deal a lot on layering, and that's where I'm pouring those emotions in. It could be emotions from the day, it could be emotions from the week. I'm not big on, I say not big on, I stay loosely informed about things, even if I'm not fond of them. Let's take the day-to-day example of politics. So you're not going to see me expressing those ideas directly because I don't feel like that's what people are really looking for if they even do take the time to look at work. And it's also, I think it can hurt you. It can hurt you as an artist, but if that's your stronghold, it's understandable. But as far as, the messages that I'm putting into the work that I do and the emotions, your question of, do I want some people to pick up on that directly or not, and maybe not pick up on those things and move on, like you said. I'm I am deliberately picking through the crowd to connect with the people that are really paying attention. And I think when you stop and take things in is when you really have you find yourself in a position to have an ultimate experience, but you do have to stop and take that in. So yeah, I am looking to convey certain messages, and where I do hope that people do pick up on the fact that I am attempting to communicate, I'm also being deliberate about protecting my vulnerability as well. So, I've done some expressive works where I have really deliberate, like words, things like that I'll inscribe or paint or lettering and things like that. And after having conversation with one of my close art friends, that conversation evolved into, you don't have to be deliberate to still get your message across. And there's a lot of magic to subtlety. I'm not always the most subtle person, but at the same time, I know how to be. And I see you smiling out there because, I can be pretty abrupt in some of our conversations, but, it comes from a good place. And, but the way I like to express myself is to keep people that want to keep figuring things out about what's going on. I mean, you can always ask a question, hey, what does this part mean? But I'm also the person that's going to stand back and enjoy other people taking in what I've done. Those responses and reactions, or lack thereof, it's not about, I'm not necessarily wanting to engage with a viewer directly in that moment, but I get a lot of joy in seeing how people take in that moment.
Sure.
And and some people do just move on, and that's okay. Everybody experiences everything so differently. Um, and I think the work that I put out, in a lot of ways, I think it can be a little too much sometimes, where maybe it's overwhelming, or it is a little too much to unpack, or it's so visually, it can be a little disruptive, and I think in your mind, because it doesn't necessarily make sense out of context.
Right.
So when you put all of the context with this, when you pack it all up, it makes sense. But of course, I put that together, so it makes perfect sense to me. But watching people decide, how they're going to engage, and if they want to figure it out, or if they want to know more. I mean, people aren't really shy when it comes to asking questions about art. They can be, but generally people are um, pretty forward, and just, hey, what does this mean, or what were you going for? And I don't always have a great answer for that, because I'm you use the word unpacking. So, when I'm in my workspace, I'm unpacking my emotions right there and in that moment. So, I'm not necessarily working towards an end result, but my end result is, I think it's okay to be selfish in your one thing, and art is my one thing. And it's my time, and it's where I get to, like I said, I make all those rules in that point, and there's a lot of success and failure that goes with that. So anyway, to answer your question, so yes, I do like to communicate, and people understand those communications, but I also enjoy the subtlety of being able to protect my emotions in whatever it was that I may have unpacked in one piece. Yeah. Great. That's a great question.
Yeah, it's interesting because when it's sounding like that, sometimes, or a lot of times even, artists will have a source of inspiration to then apply to whatever medium, and it sounds like that the inspiration isn't so much sourced as it is an opportunity for you as the artist to process in the form of 2D expressionism, which is actually quite appropriate for expressionism. So it's almost like a very raw form of expressionism, without necessarily, sometimes with words from your pieces and sometimes not. Just so that everyone at home knows, walk me through one of your paintings. Walk me through the process of the mediums. I know that you use, obviously we said mixed media, but I know that there's a lot of spray paint that you use. I'm not gonna attempt to overgeneralize here, but a lot of spray paint and a lot of paint. Walk me through what the process is to create a Murph painting.
Sure. Yeah. The beginning is always, it's always this limit. You're at this point of unlimited boundaries. You can, literally do anything that you want to. But generally, I come to grips with the piece that I just finished, and walking away with that. And that's not always easy. Can overwork or underwork pieces. But I'm kind of in a point in my path right now where I don't struggle as much with the end. So when I start over, I generally just use a layering technique. So I'll use, I'm going to run through some general things that I'll use. I'll apply a lot of washes. I use a lot of unconventional materials. I say unconventional in the academic sense. I do a lot of layering that is incorrect. Um, there's a certain order in which you apply certain mediums, and which I wasn't super familiar with until several years ago. Another conversation with another great art friend of mine. But I deal with a lot of washes, like you said, spray paint. Um, I work with acrylic. I work with high flow medium, which is essentially an acrylic medium that's the consistency of water. It's what they use in airbrushes. My buddy Jay, he's got high flow, but he runs it through an airbrush. I'll slop it on with a brush or a sponge. I'll use all sorts of different applicators. I'll use sponges and brushes. I'll pick a stick up off the ground and glob paint on it to get a different marking or a different shape or just a different texture. I like to build, I don't necessarily build texture up, um, but it occurs through the layer building that I do. I'll throw a layer of decoupage, like some antique paper,
Mhm.
um, some sort of a paper that doesn't have gloss on it, because it applies well, it covers well, you can paint over it. Um, I'll sand between layers every once in a while to kind of smooth my surface out a little bit. I like to come in with enamel pens, Sharpies, um, anything you can make a mark with. I'll throw it at a canvas or a piece of really durable paper,
Yeah.
and build it. So in between all of these different little phases, little layers, essentially, there's a lot of dry time in between that. So maybe I'll do a color or two of spray paint, just some quick hits of pops of color or fluid motion. Um, and then I'll take the hair dryer and I'll blow dry that a little bit so that if I come back in and I touch it or smears or something. But a lot of it is the drying and the curing of different layers so that when you keep building on top, you're not making a
Well, and particularly, I don't want to over. Uh, Again, I don't want to generalize too much, but in some of the pieces, as an outsider coming in and
mess.
seeing, that is true with the textures and the layers, also because of your use, or at least, you know, for whatever it's worth, my observation of your use of a lot of found objects. Like you said, you mentioned a stick, but I mean, I've noticed in a couple of paintings of a found object of, you know, a, a street sign silhouette, or I think an interesting shape of like a street sewer, and using that as a
Oh,
placeholder
yeah.
for those shapes to go onto the painting. And you know, almost creating molds out of things that are found, that are interesting in texture or shape or whatever, and then somehow getting that shape and replicating it onto your paintings to create those layers somewhat organically,
Sure.
and yet structured because they're found, if that makes sense. So it's an
Right.
interesting layer. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good one. That's a good point about the manhole cover. That I printed some T-shirts off a manhole cover. If you can retrieve the negative or the positive of about any unlevel surface,
yeah,
you can use it to make stuff and things. It's an interesting thing. I was trying to print off of a tree outside because the bark had really large sections of bark, and I just tried it out to see what happened, and it didn't work that great. But that's a lot of what art and life is in general, is you just keep trying stuff.
right.
Yeah, that's how it is.
No matter what, I think that's probably what everyone's uh, name of the game is for these last 5 weeks or so. Just I'm
Yeah.
just gonna keep trying. So uh,
You got to keep trying. You
you've just
never
been
never
expressing
give up.
that in your paintings for the last who knows how long. So you're way ahead of the game with that. So let me ask a hard question. What has been one of the more um, unexpected? Um, what's been something unexpected for you as an artist to not so much deal with, but almost we'll call it unexpected as a pleasant surprise. Like, okay, I'm now doing this as a professional artist. I'm going out there. I'm selling my work. I'm putting it in galleries, which all of which I know that you do in shows and whatnot. Um, what has been a positive, like unexpected? I didn't realize that was going to be the case for this scenario.
Sure. Hey, that's a another great question. Maybe that's a little more difficult than the other ones. Uh, you know, this is not an easy path, so I'm not really shy about that. Um,
Sure.
um, you've got to want it. So, man, that is a great question. So I've taken, I think with the intention that I set out on, when I was 19, 20 years old, and I took a little painting class, I think at a Michaels or someplace like that, and it was like a 6 week class. It was $100, $50, whatever it was, and then I got the material list. And, you're 19, 20 years old, and you're like, wow, okay, there's this, you know, a handful of these little tubes of paint and 3 or 4 brushes, and I have to spend another $150 on
Right.
this. So I did this class, and the lady, really great instructor, and painted this nice little scene with a river, a lake, and some trees. And I mention this kind of frequently when it comes up, but it was one of those paintings that you look at and you say, that's nice. Um, and what I learned from that, I learned some application techniques and some blending and some color management and things like that. But the one thing that I took away from that class was that I might paint, but that was not what I was going to do. It wasn't going to be in this format. So I knew that I really wanted to do this, but I also knew that I didn't have the resources or support system for art school and things like that. So um, I guess to really answer your question, the biggest pleasant surprise is how figuring out how to make this path be functional
Okay.
has required me to do so many other things to figure it out. So I've had to do so many things besides art to learn how to sell art, produce art that people want to buy, produce art people want to look at, to figure out how to bring art up in conversations. Because you don't just meet somebody on the street and say, "Hey, I'd like to make cool stuff. Would you like to see it?" And then say, "Would you like to buy it?"
Right.
It's a, that's a, I'm not, truth be told, that's what I did when I was 6, 7 years old. I would, and I have a piece that my grandmother gave me when I turned 30. It's a little drawing of a dog, and I would sell these little drawings of boats and dogs to my grandparents and my aunts and uncles that would come off of a couple of quarters or whatever. So, um, you're not thinking when you're 6, 7 years old that this is, where life is going. Um, and it took a lot for me to get to the point that I realized that this is what I was here for.
Mm.
And not everybody is fortunate enough to have that discovery in life. So I really am really happy about that. But the biggest surprise is, or the biggest pleasant surprise is, again, a great question, is all of the things that it took to get to this conversation with you today.
Interestingly enough, that almost a uh, not to be overly cliche, but the journey better than the product itself. Or I don't mean that as the art. Obviously, I mean that as the journey, as opposed to the sum of all of its parts are greater. Um, along with that, I guess what I, we'll just ask. And this one is, I hope this isn't so much negative as much as it is just perhaps real, but especially with expressionism, do you find, um, and I know this based off of just some of the conversations you and I have had, that this is, um, Murph is in it to find the 1 in 100 person to be interested rather than try to make for the masses and everyone buy my stuff. That there's a genuine, although I'm sure it would be nice for everyone to buy my stuff. That's true no matter what you're talking about. Um, but but I know that from our conversations, you're looking for a true connection with someone that, I think that you have a genuine desire of what you're creating and not wanting to sacrifice that in an effort that we're going to find the people that are interested in this specific, expression, as opposed to let me create other expressions that maybe aren't as authentic, to appease more people or to appease to the masses. Is that, I'm kind of throwing you under the bus there? Is that a little accurate?
It's a lot accurate. It's again, it's taken, we're the sum of all of our experiences, like you said. Um, there's so many experiments in this. Um, you do toe the line of, I think every artist has, if not, they will. Every artist has done what they can at some point to say, okay, what's the sure thing? What's that one thing? And you can chase that. And I think some people find it actually sometimes, to where they're able to market, to the masses. But I think even in doing that, the odds are still more a 1 in 100. It's a tough thing. But I think what you find is that we all come to a crossroads, if not daily. But we all get, artists always hit the crossroads of, staying true to their ideals and authenticity, or trying to cater to a market. And I don't think either is wrong. People have to pay their bills. People have to feed their kids. And so, I've dabbled in some of that sure thing, some of the, I've gone as far as to target market specific pieces, to people or smaller groups of people. And I'll be honest with you, even when you've got a sure thing, it doesn't always pan out like that. And again, this is an analogy for life, I think. But at the same time, I think I reached a point probably 7 or 8 years ago, and that's, even 10, 12 years in, where I had to realize that I wasn't doing this for everyone else.
Mm.
That's nice and that's cool, but I express myself for me. It's like I said, it's the one chance that I get to do that, just unabashedly and without limits. And I think human beings need an outlet, whether it's exercise or even something as simple as a little bit of counseling, or exercise, I think, is a big one. Or hobby. Not big on the word hobby, but human beings need things to do.
Yeah.
And this is my thing. This is the thing that I go to, and that as many other things as I've done, which isn't a huge list, pretty modest lifestyle. But I've had some fun and some good times. This is the thing that I always come back to.
Mm.
So when people disappoint me, and when life disappoints me, and when everything else has failed me, this is what I've got. And I'm good with that. But at the same time, when it's time to celebrate, or, raise a toast, this is also what I turn to. So it's not just gloom and doom, this is what I turn to in my joyous moments as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, yeah, and I should have prefaced this a little bit better, that, or at least that statement a little bit better. I certainly meant it as a form of, praise, that there's a level of authenticity that you have in your work. And I know that, not just in your own expression, which is genuine, but also in the form of, um, the patience of finding the right connection and the right fit, as opposed to just, you know and and don't misunderstand me. There are plenty of good things, as you said. It's good to pay the bills, and it's
Yeah, for
to,
sure.
and many times, you don't have to sacrifice, as an artist, you don't have to sacrifice who you are, to do that. But sometimes, uh, it's just sticking to the expression as you do, whether or not, and I guess, good for you um, for sticking to, this is what I know and this is for me. And
Sure.
I might find a few connections through that, but this is for me. So,
Yeah,
that's
it's a fine, it's a balance, I think, too, because there's an old a joke. One of my art mentors, a joke we used to share is that sometimes you're making art and sometimes you're paying the bills. So you think about, I'm going to briefly touch on art history here for a moment, but the reason that the Sistine Chapel is painted so eloquently, and those monuments and those things, they're so centered around art, is because the entities that had those things done are the entities that had the money
sure.
to pay for it. And so, I love doing custom work. I love doing commission work. But I also, there's a reality to when you see some of my loud and boisterous expression. Um, it's not necessarily going to think, hey, maybe Murph could paint our sign. You know, uh, uh, it's something I can do, and I have the tools and resources for it. But I don't think that the reality is that that's what people necessarily think of when they see my work, and that's okay. When I need to um, market window painting, I market window painting, and when I need to market custom skate decks or something like that, I move in that direction. But I try not to let that dictate my path too much. But honestly, in all honesty, in all the years I've done this, I don't think I've ever turned a commission down. Um, I just try to be really open and clear with people up front that, because people ask about commission and they'll say, "Oh, can you do a portrait of my dog or a portrait of my daughter's graduation or something?" And those are great ideas, but my answer was always no. I said I can do it, but I know the right person for that that's going to fit your needs. So I'm really, making a connection is great, but making the right connection is so much better.
Sure.
And I try to make connections with people. I think that's a lot of the reason that I started the local artist guild, or, that's been going on for almost 2 years now. Just to touch on that is that I wanted to build my network of artists that are here locally, so that because I have found myself in a place where I've spent enough time building a social network in town, here in downtown Woodstock, that people do come to me and they do ask for things that I'm not the guy for the job, but they know that I'm connected to somebody that can help them,
Right.
or that there's a good chance that I know somebody. So, I've brokered a couple of things, even I think in our group. People send me pictures from around town and say, "Hey, do you know whose work this is?" And I'll make that connection happen. Or do you know somebody that does such and such? if you're going to ask about pet portraits, I'll give you the list of 3 or 4 people that do that. I mean, it's only in my best interest
Right.
to help people. I don't know. I think it's only in everybody's best interest to help people.
Well, and to value the relationship over the transaction too.
Sure.
That means it's not your transaction. It puts the relationship first. So definitely.
Yeah. I mean, that's real. It's not, everybody. There's plenty of money in the world to be made, and it does cause a lot of anxiety in people to, want to make that happen faster. And I'm certainly guilty of that myself. I mean, I was in my 20s for 10 years, and even generally in your 20s, money is not really, it's not coming in, and it doesn't seem to ever, it doesn't ever seem like it's going to work out. And then your 30s, you get a little better, and as you get older, you learn how to manage and get by on. Actually, what you learn to do is to get by on less, so that you can actually have a little more.
Right.
But it's art's an expensive endeavor, so understanding how to either work with what you have, or make the best of what you got, or learn how to. I'm big on scavenging. I know that's not a super positive term, but like you're talking about found objects. I mean, I don't turn down free material. And another, talking about art networking and things like that. Even if I can't use it, there's a good chance I know somebody that can.
Sure.
So there's a lot of that, and that's really important. It only helps me to help other people, and there's so much value in that. It's really hard to explain.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Murph, thanks for taking this time. Before actually we quit, I'll just leave the floor open to you. So don't do this often, but here it is. Is there anything else that you'd like to say while we're still recording?
It's I've really enjoyed watching a couple of my comrades do interviews with you. I learned things about them that I didn't know. And so I really appreciate the initiative and the support that Elm Street's looking to, put forth, with the bandwidth that's available. I know things are different now. I think that's going to be part of it. But I'm glad to get to see you and talk with you. I think it's been a little bit since we've actually had a face-to-face, and regardless of the circumstances, I'm glad that we've gotten to talk and hang out a little bit. It's helpful for me, and I know you're doing what you can out there for the community. I see the playgrounds going up, so that's exciting. I guess if I had anything to put out there, I think when we're all social distancing. One of the things that I've been racking my brain about is, I've touched on this a few times, is to figure out how to help people, realistically and reasonably help people, within my means. And I'm doing what I can. I try to stay in contact regularly with several people in the local artist guild, and that's helpful for both me and them.
Right.
We have calls like this, and we catch up. We complain, we have a cocktail, we try to make sure that nobody's going without, and try to keep the brainstorming going as to, what's next. Things are going to be different. One of the things I'm looking at a solution on that maybe we didn't really touch on, but, my work is primarily in the field. It is in the locations that may or may not have people go into them a whole lot anymore. So everybody's trying to figure out the solution right now. But what gives me keeps my fires burning hot is that human beings are problem solvers at the cellular level. And, we were made to figure this kind of stuff out. And I think paying attention to the people that are helping finding ways to help other people, even if it's just staying in contact with each other. That's what's important right now. So I'm gonna leave it out there at that. And if I can do anything for you or anybody on your staff feels that I can be of service, or if I can put you in contact with anybody that can help, um, I'm more than happy to exercise my network to help people out however I can, and that's what it's about.
Yeah, that's fair. And I'll echo that because I know that's true based off of things that we worked on in the past. So
Yeah, absolutely, man.
So, well, with that, Murph, I appreciate you taking the time and interviewing a little bit with us, and I'm looking forward to having more local artists involved in the community. I know through Local Artists Guild or with Elm Street or however, that certainly it contributes to the culture, which is right now we are social distancing and not necessarily experiencing, but that all the more proves why the artists are needed. So I appreciate you taking this time, and thanks so much. And we'll see you soon. All right.
Christopher, thanks so much. Good to see you, man.
Yeah, you too.